I just wanted to make a video before the election on Tuesday about the crypto market. And I'm going to start with Bitcoin here. I'm going to start with this linear scale Gann chart from the very beginning of time back here in October of 2011. And we can see the symmetry of this very, very perfectly from the orange level where it got rejected up here in 2021 and straight back down to the purple angle where you can see that purple angle was a great resistance in the past, and then it flipped it to support and then went through one angle at a time until it got to this blue angle up top where this weekly candle just now had a wick above it, so that is why it got rejected. But not only that, if you combine the Fibonacci to that with the high in 2017 down to the low in 2018, we can also see that that was also the 4.236 full extension at 73,201. So does this mean that price really needs to go back down to 62,977 or this orange level around 61.5? I don't really think so, and I'm going to show you why on the other chart. So here we go back to Bitcoin on this new scale chart. So I have been showing this chart for a while, and day over day, it has been trying to break this orange level at 69,200. We'll just round up there, 69,200, trying to break above that. And after the market closed yesterday, they just tanked the market down 2.5% back down to levels. So what I'm really seeing below is this arc. And if the election becomes really, really volatile, it could even wick down to this arc again, which kind of sits just under 64,000, maybe 63.8, or it could wick below into the low 63s because it is a range and it can go above or below the range very easily, just like it can go above or below the 69,200 very easily too. Right, but I want to see the trend continue to maybe just see this be like a V bottom and quickly recover back to this 69,200 and just build a base on top of it in order to go higher. So let me just show you what it looks like on the weekly chart here to get a better perspective of everything. And you can see this scale has also been very, very accurate. From the 2017, that blue angle was a previous resistance, then a support, then a support, and then it's straight up to the orange level again, where it was a resistance before. But also now it's kind of confirmation with this bullish engulfing candle right here that was up 9.8% for the week, that really this arc does kind of want to be a support now. So even if this 69,000 doesn't want to hold this week because of the volatile election, I think that's okay. It still looks like it might be building a base above the 64, above the 63 to go higher. But ideally, the goal is, if this is just a rejection at this level, the goal is to quickly just do a V bottom and then close above, right? That would be the goal to do that. So therefore, this chart is getting more and more bullish. And I think even with the election volatility, the trend does look like it's going to be higher. And my conviction is still that this these candles in the future weeks to come is probably going to go back up and press towards this 45-degree angle in the 80,000s above. So I am getting more and more bullish, and actually the lower it does go, the more bullish I am getting, because this is something that is looking very, very perfect. And you can see it perfectly here, how this bottom arc held a support, right? And you can see how over time this top arc has been a support or a resistance as well, until it broke out and made a higher high, right? It hasn't really made a higher high. Actually, it's made two consecutive higher highs, right? From here, one and two. Two consecutive higher highs in a row on the weekly chart, and we have not really seen that before. So this is just giving me more confirmation that even if this orange level that I thought was a great possibility to hold, even if it doesn't, if it goes back down to the arc, confirms it as support, and then comes back up, I think that is a very bullish situation for the future. Now that we got that perspective of Bitcoin, let's go take a look at the others chart because of the altcoins. They seem to be very, very, very weak right now going into the election. So here's a chart of the others chart, and this is excluding the top 10. So this is not excluding the stable coins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, any of those top coins. And I want to show you what happened just now overnight, right? It came back down to finally back test this arc, right? It's been in limbo for a while and altcoins have been bleeding for a while, but maybe this is why. Maybe it just wanted another back test of this arc since the breakout and the back test of the blue level down here already held. So it was a breakout and it never really touched the arc until now. So possibly this is what the altcoins have been waiting for. And possibly this is right before election. So it could be a bottom before things really want to continue higher. So this is actually a very, very interesting chart here for the others. And I want to see if this holds, right? Going into election, it still could be volatile and it still could even back test this blue level down at 177 billion. But the trend is looking that it's getting tighter and tighter, right? It's holding support better and better and better. And that is just confirmation to me that this is basically the bottom for the altcoins, even though a lot of them seem to be drifting lower and lower. And let me just give you an example of some things that are drifting lower. And one example is XRP, and XRP is also drifting lower and lower, and it's making these wicks lower than the previous week's wicks. And when you zoom out here into this chart, you can see really nothing has changed. And ultimately, all I can do is just draw a black line, maybe from last week's wick, and it was at 48.6, right? 48 cents. And you look directly across, what do you see? You see a bunch of support, support, resistance, resistance, support, and resistance, right? You just see that going across just without using any indicators at all. And what do you know? This black line is kind of the halfway point between my top arc and the bottom arc. So yes, it is losing levels. Yes, it is losing weekly moving averages. It is continuously closing below the 100-week moving average, which is not good. And it looks like it even flipped to a resistance, right? So it did lose all of this. It is melting lower and lower, dripping lower and lower. That's not a good sign. But when you go to the monthly chart, when you really zoom out, what do you see? You see that it's still just basically in between the 100-month moving average and the 50-month moving average right there. So essentially, 46,290 is your support that our XRP has been building a base on top of essentially since June of 2022, right? It has been trending higher and higher month over month, and these are a series of higher lows on a monthly basis. So you can't really say that it's too bad because it's still holding support. And eventually, I still think it's going to go break above these arcs. And once it does, then the real fun can begin there. So things are looking dire right now because things feel like they aren't going to stop the bleeding. But when you zoom out on a high time frame, it's still okay. And one thing I also wanted to put on is the Ichimoku here on the monthly chart. And you can also see it's been rejected by the baseline for a long, long time, right? It's been rejected there, basically on a month-to-month basis since up here, right? This orange line going all the way down, it's never really closed a monthly candle above, except for maybe back in March. But at that time, it was still rejected by the convergent line, the blue line above. But essentially, it's never been able to break resistance, and that's why I just kept testing support. So one of these days, that trend is going to end, and the support will hold enough, and it'll break through that resistance, right? So this is just one thing you got to consider. If it can't break resistance, it's going to go back down to test support. And that's what XRP has been doing for month over month over month over month over month, right? So that's just one example of the altcoins that look like it's bleeding, but in reality, it's holding up fairly well. Another example of an altcoin that just seems to be bleeding a lot is HBAR. So HBAR from that bottom here back in January, it just went straight up to the top. there, and then it's just been bleeding ever since, going through one Gann level at a time. And this 45-degree angle was an important level to lose. And once it lost it with this bearish engulfing candle here in November of 2022, it essentially was resistance ever since. And it was no change even back in March or this giant wake up back in April of 2024. And then it rode down, 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 and now it's actually making a lower low. But when you zoom out like this, it finally hit that angle, right? Maybe that was the goal the whole time. It finally hit this blue angle that looks like it wants to hold as support. So things look like they're bleeding, but ultimately price travels to the path of least resistance. And this situation, it was still down until it got to its symmetrical support. So that's where it was. And not only that, let's just draw a line going straight across from the bottom of that wick that we just had. And what do you see here? When you zoom out, you can see it was a support, a resistance, kind of a support and a resistance over here, and a resistance over here. So this zone, even the wick that we just had, is still not a lower low from here back in December. It's not even really a lower low from here back in June of 2023, and it's just retesting support over and over again. So this is basically another example of something that could be at support right before the election that maybe wants to go higher, but it just feels terrible because it looks like it's bleeding and bleeding. But when you zoom out like this, it puts things into perspective like, hey, this could be the bottom and people are panicking near the bottom. And next is Trias, another one that feels like it's just bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. So this is from the low here in 2021, and it was straight up to the blue level, straight down through all of these angles. But if you look at the symmetry of everything, it is still okay. And what we saw from this orange level is an explosion higher to the blue level, and it also got rejected by this arc. And so true symmetry sent it right back down to this blue angle where it tried to hold as support, right? Because it was a big support zone before, but then this bearish engulfing candle right here kind of flipped it to a resistance. And according to market symmetry, it might need to go back down to the next level of support. And that's exactly what happened. So now it's back at the orange level and it feels terrible, right? It feels like it just keeps drifting lower and lower and lower and lower. But when you look at the high time frame, it's still a higher low from here, which is a higher low from here and here and here. So it is a series of higher lows still, and it finally tested its market symmetry support. I mean, there is more support right below it too with this orange angle as well, but maybe it's just buying enough time until price can actually get on top of this arc. Because you can see right here, it tried, right? It failed. It tried here, it failed. So maybe it just needs a lot more time to get above this arc right here in order to trend higher again. So this is another case of something being at support before the election for a possibility to once again go higher. And next is AZERO, and AZERO is another one that feels so terrible that it's just bleeding, right? So from that huge bullish engulfing candle that just went straight up right there, basically what we saw is just a retest of levels, the arc going up to the arc getting rejected multiple times, and then it's just started losing one level at a time. But when you do this, this is actually the 45 degree. And I've said before that price does like to gravitate to the 45 on log scale over time. And that could be the target. So this one is near support before the election, but support could be right down below around 26 cents and then finally build a base and go back up higher. But essentially, the true symmetry of it all is not that broken. And yes, it is drifting lower, especially it lost this orange level and it just collapsed essentially, right? But it still is very symmetrical and it still has hope. And the 45 is right there and it's still above it. It just had an explosive move from the bottom and it just took a long, long time to consolidate. And yeah, from 31 cents down to 25, 26 cents, it's not even that big of a deal either. It's basically near that bottom. So building that base up there right before the election time could be a good idea for an attempt to finally go higher in the future. And let's look at some movers that actually have been kind of doing very well throughout this market. And Solana is one of those, right? But even Solana is close to a support as well. And what I mean by that is from the all-time high down to the low here, you can see it's been holding this 786 Fibonacci retrace level uh, very, very nicely. Even it was once a resistance, it flipped to a support. It wicked below numerous times, but it held support. But also this blue angle here has also been holding that support. So even though it's close to resistance right now with the 886, it is also still close to support right before the election. So this is something that is looking, that is not bleeding, but it is still really close to support right before things really could start to break out into all-time highs and beyond. And let's take another example of a chart that actually has been performing very well recently and it has not been bleeding, and that is Tau. So Tau had a very explosive move from this blue angle. So talk about angles holding that support. Tau was a perfect example. So after this arc got hit up here, it went straight down to the blue angle multiple times and never really closed a weekly candle below it ever, which was enough to just send it higher back to the 886, and you can see from the all-time high down to this low, that is the 886, got rejected, and now it went back down to the 618. So it doesn't need to come back down and retest the arc around the 320s or the blue angle. Maybe not. Maybe from the 886 down to the 618 is good enough for maybe building a base and then trying to go higher. So this is another example, just like Solana, of something that did explode higher but got rejected at resistance, but now it looks like it's finding a support zone, especially around that 420 zone. So what I'm really thinking though, for coins like Solana and Tau is that yeah, they had an explosive move, but they're still holding the support zone right before an election. And next, I'm going to show you AVAX here, and AVAX from the bottom here back in 2020, straight up to the green level and back down and back up. And what do you see that's really happening right now? Well, it's battling the blue level of my GAN there, which is around $24. Price is a little bit below it right now, but that's okay. If you just drew a black line from the wick of that candle right there, what do you see actually? You see a previous resistance, a breakout, right? A previous resistance and a previous support over here, just with the black line that I drew. So essentially, being below that blue line is okay because it's just a zone, really. But it's with that black line that I just drew right there, you can see that it's near a support right before an election. So this is something that has potential to be in the bottoming process and go higher. So I've shown you many examples of what's going on, right? So everything appears to be just fine right before an election. And going back to this Bitcoin chart, it is pretty close to a resistance near an election, but I'm still considering the 69,000 a possible support, simply because we had our highest weekly candle close in a long time, right? The longest it's been since this candle right here back in June of 2024. So the market structure is shifting from higher highs to higher lows, higher high, higher low, higher high. We don't really know if it needs to come back down to 64, but that's still pretty close to 68,000 percentage wise. It's not that far away, right? So relatively, it's still pretty close to support before an election. And it also has the potential to break above this resistance as well right before the election. So no matter which charts you look at, no matter if it's Bitcoin, it's near a support. No matter if it's AVAX, it's near a support. No matter if it's the others chart that I showed you in the very beginning, it's at a support. So yes, things feel like they're bleeding with a lot of coins. Some of them like Tau and Solana and Doge, they're doing a little bit better. But you look at the others chart and what you see right here is it looks like everything is at or near a support right before the election.